What's good? It's your boy Fanon. I am going to talk about Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence Jr. A conversation I really haven't done a lot of talking about, but a lot of videos about, but I'm going to breach it in this. And the short of it is, man, look, people in the UK who are Eddie Hearn fans, you guys just need to listen to Eddie Hearn about what's going on in the UK and ignore what he's talking about in the United States, because the dude is just he's just selling something to you. Eddie Hearn came out and said something to the effect of Errol Spence Jr. versus Mikey Garcia won't do 300,000 pay-per-view buys in the United States. And that just shows me how either one of two things. Either he thinks that people will believe whatever he says, or like Bob Arum said, he doesn't understand the United States pay-per-view. He doesn't understand the United States market. Mikey Garcia is besides Canelo Alvarez, is probably the most popular Mexican fighter that there is in boxing today. And Errol Spence Jr., other than Floyd Mayweather Jr., is one of the most popular Black American fighters that we have today. Both of them are young fighters. Both of them are championship level fighters, and they both have good and growing following. And I think what you get when you have a mix like that is you have a situation where it's 1 + 1 = 3. Mikey Garcia has a distinct fan base in the United States of America. Mexican fans, Mexican American fans, and hardcore boxing fans that understand how good of a fighter Mikey Garcia is. And you have Errol Spence Jr., who has a very solid and growing fan base of African American fighters African American fight fans who know how good a fighter he is. Whether they like Terence Crawford more than they like him, or whether they like Floyd Mayweather Jr., whatever, pretty much every hardcore boxing fan knows, in the African American community, knows who Errol Spence Jr. is, and tune into his fights on Showtime, which is a smaller network than HBO and ESPN. Now, when you put the two of those together, you get what has been a traditional rivalry in American fighting. Mexican fight fans and African American fight fans cheering to see who is going to win the fight. And it's not a situation where you have, even with Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford, where you have Errol Spence Jr. having one fan base, Terence Crawford having another fan base that intersects with it in large part, where a large percentage of the people that support Terence Crawford also support Errol Spence Jr. and vice versa. There's a reason why Floyd Mayweather Jr. consistently fought on Cinco de Mayo, and on the first week of May and the second week of September, and why you would consistently have him facing guys that had Spanish surnames, whether it is Victor Ortiz or Robert the Ghost Guerrero, or non-Mexican Spanish-speaking fighters like Marcos Maidana 2 times. You consistent Canelo Alvarez being another one, Oscar De La Hoya being another one. It's because there's constantly that demographic of people coming together in boxing. It's the two most active fan bases in boxing in America. There was a presentation that was done at the beginning of 2017 by Steven Espinoza at HBO, when he talked about who they were trying to go after and who they were trying to service as far as their boxing programs in the United States, the demographics that they were going after. And when they mentioned it, he talked about, and these are loose, this is just what I recall of the numbers. You can go back to, it's probably going to still be on Showtime Boxing channel if they still have it up, where he talked about the avid boxing fans that they were trying to go after and the demographics that were most interested in boxing. When they surveyed fans of sports fans, right? Mexican sports fans, European American sports fans, Black American sports fans, they looked and said, okay, well, they asked of avid fight fans from people who are from Mexico or Mexican descent, 60% of those consider themselves to be boxing fans. So of all of the fans, sport fans that were Mexican sports fans, and I think they might have done Latino, so it probably crossed over a little bit into, people from Puerto Rico, people from South America. But when you're talking about that community in the United States, the largest percentage of that are Mexican fans. 60% of people that liked sports were consider themselves to be boxing fans. 60% of that 60% consider themselves to be avid boxing fans or hardcore boxing fans. Same thing was true of the Black American fight fans. Not quite the larger percentage, but 50 consider themselves, of all sports fans, 50% consider themselves to be boxing fans, and 50% of that consider themselves to be active and avid boxing fans. So what Showtime was going to do is Showtime is going to cater to those demographics, which is why you see Showtime boxing doing well, where HBO decided to go after the European American market and going after trying to regain, at least this is the way that I've heard it explained. I didn't actually hear HBO executives like Peter Nelson or the guys at HBO ever say this, but my understanding was that they were trying to gain the fans, the European American fans that now follow the UFC and MMA very, very closely. And so they started trying to feature guys for like Gennady Golovkin and Sergey Kovalev and Vasily Lomachenko, and really tried to get that market by going after that demographic. But the problem with that demographic was that their percentages they have a large number of potential fans, but a much lower percentage of them consider themselves to be boxing fans. And an even lower percentage of those people who consider themselves to be boxing fans were avid boxing fans. And the important thing about avid boxing fans are they're fans that you can consistently rely on tuning into your telecasts. So when you have a situation where you have Errol Spence Jr. and you have Mikey Garcia, I would be willing to bet that Mikey Garcia's fan base is going to be 300,000 people from LA and Texas wanting to see that fight because they want to see if he can beat Errol Spence Jr. And when the talk starts going, you're going to get the same amount of people that want to see Errol Spence Jr. that are willing to tune in for Errol Spence Jr. So you more than likely will see 300,000. I can't see it doing less than 600,000 pay-per-view. 300,000 pay-per-view coming from Mikey's fan camp and 300,000 people coming from Errol Spence Jr.'s camp to come to meet together, and then you get 600,000, and then you get the plus with all the buzz, all the conversations that are going to be going on on YouTube channels, on English-speaking YouTube channels and Spanish-speaking YouTube channels. The fact that they're going to be selling it on ESPN Deportes, ESPN Deportes is going to talk about it. Spanish-speaking channels are going to be talking about it. Man, that thing it's like Reese's. Peanut butter and chocolate, man. It comes together and makes something that really works and sells a lot of ticket. You know what I mean? So when Eddie Hearn said that, man, this conversation is less about Eddie Hearn than it is about, it is. Just don't listen to that nonsense. And this is why, honestly, now that this fight is looking like it's going to be made, I can understand why you would see somebody like, I think his name's Tim Smith, or Al Heyman, who you never really hear from, or executives at ESPN saying, look, man, we know the best fight in the welterweight division is Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford. That's like the dream fans' delight, because that might actually tell you who the best welterweight is. But if you're trying to sell the most tickets, and if you're trying to have a pay-per-view event that's going to do the best, then what you're looking at is a situation where you have two distinct fan bases that come together and fight one another. And that is clearly in the United States. And if you're not from the United States, you more than likely you don't understand the degree to which this is true. Because you didn't go to high school wherever there's a Mexican population and a black population in the same school. There's going to be competition. There's a lot of intermingling. There's a lot of socialization that happens at different levels, but it's two distinct communities that have a rivalry. And that whenever you have two fan bases that have a natural rivalry with one another, it explodes. Another example of a natural rivalry is where you have a Puerto Rican fan base and a Mexican American fan base or a Mexican fan base. They battle one another and then they tune in and watch one another. That's just how it is in the United States. But if you don't understand that if you're not from the United States and you don't see that maybe like in your day-to-day life, if you don't see that in your own experience in other areas, man, you don't understand how, even though there's a lot of differences in the communities almost always live in close proximity to one another. And there's that rivalry. And this rivalry within the PBC, I mean, it would be hard for me to argue as I sit down and I look and say, okay, which fight will do better in pay-per-view? Would it be Errol Spence Jr., Terence Crawford, or Errol Spence Jr. versus Mikey Garcia? It's hard to argue that it's not Errol Spence Jr. versus Mikey Garcia. Now, what's the better fight? What would go in there where you don't really know what's going to happen, and which one would go the furthest towards saying, who the best welterweight in the world is? That's clearly Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford. At least, when you compare that to Errol Spence Jr. and Mikey Garcia. But as far as like what, 1 + 1 equals 2. When actually 1 + 1 might equal 1 when it comes to Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. because they have the same fan base. I'm a fan of Errol Spence Jr. I'm a fan of Terence Crawford, right? Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. are both members of my community. That's not the case where you have Errol Spence Jr. or Terence Crawford versus Mikey Garcia. Wasn't the situation where you have Shane Mosley when you had Shane Mosley versus Oscar De La Hoya, or Oscar De La Hoya versus Tito Trinidad, or Oscar De La Hoya versus Floyd Mayweather Jr. All of those fights did huge numbers because people would pour and support that would support Oscar De La Hoya in that regard, and Oscar De La Hoya also took advantage of that dynamic. Is why he did so well. Oscar De La Hoya versus Sweet Pea versus Pernell Whitaker. That's just what it is in the United States, man. So to laugh at that matchup and act as if that's not a major fight, dude, there's no fight. There's no fight that can be made outside of they can be made at Matchroom. That's a bigger fight than Mikey Garcia, other than Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, because then you are bringing two different fan bases together. You're bringing the UK fan base and you're bringing an American fan base. Other than that, there is no matchup. There is no matchup in Matchroom boxing that can be bigger than that. And quite honestly, not even Canelo Alvarez or Demetrius Andrade versus Canelo is going to be like that, because neither Demetrius Andrade nor Danny Jacobs has the following in their own community that Errol Spence Jr. has. So, just listening to that, man, I thought it was comedy, and it shows from my experience, a lack of understanding of the market that this fight is taking place in. Anyway, so with that, hey, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. And with that, I'm out. Peace.